Guten Tag. So, welcome to day 2 on a short week, I guess. I don't know what else to call that, but yeah, it's game design week. Trying to figure out a way to design a tabletop game. And the design for this game is themed on being themeless. It's a very basic game design that is usable to create other games with. And that's a complicated concept to wrap my head around, but basically it's, if you've ever seen people who have taken like a Trivial Pursuit game or a Monopoly game or a Chutes and Ladders game and given it a new story, a new theme, and new artwork, and essentially made a new game out of this game. Well, I kind of want to do something similar where I make a basic game structure game, how to make it, so that you can design a game using this skeleton game, again, essentially. And it's basically like a playtestable version of it. Like, what would you need to build up the first prototype version of your game to play? And take this idea and say, like, okay, now you can make a space game. Now you can make a fantasy game. Now you can make a film noir mystery game. You can make a shopping game or something of that sort. I don't know if I'm going to be able to cover all of the genres of gameplay, because there's usually, when you look at a game design, when you look at tabletop game design specifically, there are a few different types of gameplay. So there's a wow, I am really pale if that's shining that reflection there. Yeah. The game design tabletop games, there are sort of like 5 to 7 categories of major game that you can play, and then thematically what you do with them. So like Monopoly is a different type of game than Chutes and Ladders. So the gameplay type, like, I feel like the game I'm trying to make is one that's distinctly along the lines of, I mean, it has the possibility of being cooperative or competitive. As I like to do my games, that you can do either one of those things. But like a Candyland game has a very, you have a linear path, and a mechanism for deciding how far you move. And once you've moved, the ability or the tendency to encounter circumstantial situations that you have to handle. So in some games, that's, you spin the spinner, it says move 4 spaces, you land on a square, and maybe it's an empty square and you don't do anything. If it's a square with writing on it, you flip over a card on the deck of cards in the middle, and the card tells you what happens. So it might be like, you encounter the boogie monster, move back 3 spaces. That's a very, very basic game style. And it's not my favorite. It leaves everything up to chance. There's no strategy, there's no planning, there's no rationing or resource management. It's not my favorite kind of gameplay. It is a fairly simple method of building a game. So if your inclination is to build a very simple game that you can try out, that's pretty simple. And honestly, you don't need anything other than a pencil, a set of paper, a couple of sheets of paper to make your squares that you travel around the edge of the page. You can do a little spiral and put the center, a big circle on the center, and you travel around to get to the circle at the center, and whoever gets there first wins. And then at certain squares along the way, you put a symbol, and when you land on it, here's the deck of cards over in the top corner, draw a card, flip it over, it tells you what you have to do. Like, that's a super simple game. You just pull out a set of dice and you roll, and that tells you how many spaces you move each turn. Very simple game style to build. I could do something like that. Not really my favorite thing in the world to do. So I may end up doing something a little more non-linear path. So I feel like I want to do, like, there's looping paths where you're going around and around trying to accumulate certain things. So it's a collecting game. And that's a little bit more something I'm interested in doing. And once you've collected everything you need, getting to a certain point on the board, that then use those things that you've collected to do the last bit of the gameplay. So it's very similar to my Cyberpunk game that I did, where the track is a loop that you can travel, and you can expand to grow the size of the board for later gameplay. Sorry. So having a looping track and planning and resource management to acquire the tools that you need to win the game, that's a little more interesting a game for me. And with the game like the Cyberpunk game and some of the other games that I've sort of come up with, the strategy involved in rationing your resources, that's sort of like the resource you need to move is also the resource you need to beat an opponent. And sometimes the opponent is other players, sometimes it's the villain of the game. Those tools are useful in my mind in making a game where when you win or lose, it's because of some of the choices you've made in the gameplay. And I prefer that type of game to pure chance. There's the other type of game, which is more of a Trivial Pursuit game, where it's not planning, thinking, and organizational, but knowledge that you use as the means of winning. That's another game I can appreciate the style of. It's not a chance game. It's not a you have no control over, like, legitimately, if you sat down and played some of those chance style race board games, like whoever gets to the end of the game first wins, you can make a playable game that way that isn't chance based. Like I said, you could use the mechanism for motion is the same mechanism for overcoming obstacles that you might land on, and like maybe those cards are also bonuses for certain areas. So you can make certain areas of the board a terrain that are more risky to travel through or slow you down. So, like, I might, I could build a game where there's a circular path, and as you pass through the circle, you're going through 4 or 6 territories. So if you look at concepts like earth, air, fire, water, going through those 4 types of terrain, if you choose a character who's, say, a fire power character, and you're passing through the water terrain, maybe your ability to move is cut in half. So if you have a game like that where your movement on the board is rolled randomly, or a spinner, it doesn't matter if anybody's playing the characters at that point. Like, when you set it up, you could set that board up and you could just have like a random number generator and have a computer play itself. And you can watch all the pieces move. It's like the winner and the loser aren't necessarily like it sort of feels like it's predetermined that you're going to lose that game. It's not really predetermined, but you can't do anything to improve your odds of winning. Your odds are just going to be whatever luckily rolls on each one of your turns. And that, to me, that's watching a story unfold, not interacting and making choices in the story. And that's not usually a type of game that I enjoy playing. Now, if you're doing that elemental game where you're traveling around the board and you make a mechanism for the character moving on the board to be items collected. You collect a certain number of things going across the board at a certain rate, or you land on a spot, you pick up a card, and that card is how you move, but it's also, say, like a protective lantern for your fire so that it doesn't go out in water. So it eliminates the penalty of fire traveling through water territory. And making that a mechanism means that if you're traveling through fire territory and you spend your lantern to move, you don't have that protection when you're going through water. And so, like, that to me is more like, victory is the reward for well thought out planning and movement strategy. When you look at some of the games that I've reviewed, like the Star Trek game, that's a collecting game, and it's sort of a circular board. It's actually it's a circular board with both it had, what was it? It had the 4 quadrants, or was it 6? Can't even remember now. It had the multiple quadrants that you could go through, and each one was sort of a loop in and of itself, but that loop also connects to neighboring loops through star docks. And inside each loop are some teleporters that do offer you the opportunity to move from any one loop to any other loop. And so it does offer a sense of more expansive terrain to travel, it's not just a monodirectional track, and it's not a continuous single loop either. And it adds some complexity and eliminates it doesn't really eliminate it. It distracts from the fact that it is essentially just a set of loops. So it has that possibility to it. I sort of like that track design. I may have to think about doing that. I may opt to experiment with doing that, some version of that track design, with both multiple loops that connect to each other, but also have a means of transferring across the center of the board to another loop. And then a collecting aspect of that game in the Star Trek game, the collecting they're all the same thing. They're actually, depending on which version you were playing, it was all the treaties were the same. They were just a treaty marker. In the captain's version of the game, it's some of them counted for 2, some of them counted for 1. And outside of that, the cards that you could use were events that happen. That's sort of like, that's pretty basic. It's pretty straightforward how you can use that. So building a collecting game, that's one possibility with that arrangement. And if I were to build a board with 4 elements, I could do earth, air, fire, water. I could also do, I think Feng Shui has 6. I think it's water, wood, fire, metal, earth, and air. I can't remember for sure. I'd have to go back and look. But so you could do 6 territories, or you could do 4 territories, something like that. And if you did that, you could easily build like I keep going back to I don't want to theme it because I want this game to be themeless, allowing you to build themed games on the infrastructure of this game design, and then give you the basics of how to assemble a modular board and the playing pieces, and then generate the theme for your game later. So I think, that's sort of what I'm, the puzzle I'm trying to work on right now. Like, I will sort of work on, can I build a modular board that can play this type of game? A collecting, multi-ring game style. And then make basic mechanics and movement rules. And then I will construct the game to play on it as an example of one way to do it. I might come up with 1 or 2 different story elements that could be made this way. I think that's what I'm trying to do this week. So today is Wednesday. Tomorrow's Thursday, which should be when I upload a Throwback Thursday review of something I've done in the last 8 months, video for daytime, and then I'll talk more about game development tomorrow night. And then Friday, Saturday are both going to be, I believe we're up on artwork again for daytime video. And then nighttime video is again game review. And then after artwork is video game and health and well-being are the two for next week. Video game goes up on Monday. So I can do some more game development on Sunday and maybe some of Monday. Next week, we're doing tabletop game right now. Next week, we're also doing product design, and the Instructables contest for the game design stuff ends on Monday next week. But they also have a contest for for cement, stone, or concrete Instructables, and so I figure I could give it a try, see if I can create something out of stone or something like that as a product that I can create, and then show the tutorial of what I did. So I think what I'm aiming for the next few days is try to do my artwork review and rate and creative prompts inspired by for Friday and Saturday. Throwback Thursday for reviewing a project that I've done at some point during this year. And then work on this game design and start to explore what I can do with concrete, stone, or cement. I don't think I'm going to be doing anything with concrete or cement because I don't have a supply of it right now. I do have some rocks that I can play with, see if I can make something interesting out of that. I don't know if that'll get anything really interesting or impressive off of that, but I want it to also be a product that I can produce and potentially sell, so that I can again see if I can do Instructables and weekly creative project video with those ideas. So I got to brainstorm some of that tonight. Like, I could do painted rocks. That's a pretty simple thing. I could do wire wrap stone jewelry. I could do carved stone stuff. I have to really think about it. I thought about doing like a stone mosaic, or if I could, I'd do a castable concrete or cement sculpture of some kind, a bookend, or how to turn anything into a bookend or something like that. That would be fun. I just don't have the resources for it right now. I just got a notice today that I don't have any money to make it through the rest of the month. So that's just going to be the way things are going to go for a while. I got to figure out what I'm going to do for the project for cement and stone and whatnot. But I'm working on this game design. I really do think adapting a similar multi-track board to the Star Trek game is sort of what I want to do. And I want it to be a collecting game. But I want to do a variable on that where there's like the Vampire Hunter game that I think I've mentioned before, where the things you collect in that game are distinctly for what you're going to need to defeat the villain of the game. And whether or not you collect an item or end up confronting a monster is a chance element of the game. So basically, when you set up the game, there are these tiles that you put at certain points around the game. And these tiles are put face... I'm trying to remember. I think you put them face down. And when you... Yeah, it was... There are 3 rooms you have to go through before you get to the head vampire's room. And each room has, I think, like 5 to 7 tiles. And on one side of the tile are like a gravestone, trying to remember if it was like a villager and a bat, something like that. And when you go to an object, when you go to one of those tiles and you flip it over, oh, no. That's right. The mechanic on that game is there's a tower in the center that does a blue or a red light, and blue light is night, red light is day, and both faces of those tiles they have an image in red and an image in blue, and so when the blue light's shining, it washes out the blue lines, so you don't see them, so you only see the red image because it turns purple in the blue light. And so the top of the tile is some innocuous thing, and the bottom of the tile is either, in some cases, a werewolf, a vampire, or a ghost. And in some cases, it's, say, in the graveyard, I believe it's like a wooden stake. In the room where you might encounter a werewolf, I believe it's the garlic. And then in the room where you might encounter other vampires, it's the cross or something like that. And so you have to have a cross, a stake, and a garlic to defeat the vampire at the end. So you're trying to accumulate these tools. But each of these tools, there's enough for the players to each get one of each. But to get them, you have to risk an encounter with a werewolf, a ghost, or a vampire. And so accumulating those things, that's a kind of mechanic that I kind of want to make in my game. So you're trying, the things you're trying to acquire aren't taken for granted to be just items. They may be an injury or an opponent that you have to defeat. Why would you argue with me on that? Just do what I tell you to do, please. Okay, so looking at that, I'm going to have to sort of break down how that works again in my head. It's been a few years since I played that game, I think. But making the points on the board that you seek out, potential hazards, potential boons, and maybe something that controls your ability to move on the board. And maybe helps you resolve any conflicts you're in. I don't know. I'll have to think about that. But I think that's the model on which I'm going to sort of work on my game design. I'll take a look at some of that tonight and have a little bit more detail to discuss tomorrow night for it. and I will see if I can assemble a blank form and a designed game form. So my blank form might be seeing if I can get some white contact paper and a dry erase marker and create the elements of the gameplay, and then erase that and do a different type of gameplay on it. All right, so that's it for tonight. We're about a half an hour in, so I think that's decent. I will catch you tomorrow for more of this. And tomorrow is Thursday, so keep an eye out for the Throwback Thursday, theoretically. I know I said I was going to do it last week, and I didn't, did I? I was too busy trying to find another place to be for a few days. Get that all worked out. Well, such is the life of being a homeless poor man. All right, have a good one. Take care, and I'll see you tomorrow.